We are going to touch on sociology of aging when, in fact, it is an entire field of study. It's called gerontology, which is the study of aging populations and the impact that that has on societies. And so, speaking of the impact that age can have on societies, I want to take a look at a population pyramid. Actually, I want to compare two population pyramids. So here you can see a population pyramid from 1950, and I want to point out a few things. I want to point out the very bottom because, as you can see, this is the distribution of people in the population based upon their age. And so that bottom line of the graph is gigantic. And remember, this is 1950. And so if you were to think about why would there be so many 0 to 4-year-olds in 1950? The baby boom, right? So you see the baby boom right here in front of you. And so it then gradually it kind of gets smaller, then it gets a little bit bigger, then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. I also want to bring your attention to the top where it says 85 plus. And so you can kind of see what the age ranges were at the top end. Now, in contrast, I want to bring up 2012. So you can see that this is shaped differently. You can see where it's still the widest, right? And that is actually right around ages 55 to 59 or so. And those are the baby boomers. Those are the people that were 0 to 4 in 1950. And so you can see where having so many people in that population has sustained population. It's not that all of a sudden there was this one bump in huge amounts of population and then it narrowed back down, although people are saying that it very well might, but rather that it has sustained, that those baby boomers had children and that now altogether we have a larger American society. But in relation to age, you can see in 1950 where it's 85 plus, right? Well, now it's 100 plus is the highest bracket. And so you can see if you look at 85 to 89, 90 to 94, and so on, that there are so many more people, even though it looks smaller in comparison to how many people we have altogether. But people are living longer and longer. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that means for our society and what that means for us on an individual level. And so to take a look at the impact that this can have, especially when we have the largest part of our society still, right? The baby boomers quickly becoming older and older and older. And so what that's going to mean for our society. So there are different types of age. The one that we always refer to is our number, right? Our chronological age. So how old are you? And we don't really talk about the fact that there are other ways that our age kind of manifests. And so one is our functional age, and that's defined by what we can do. Sometimes this is called ADL, so the activities of daily living. How much can you still take care of your needs, like feeding and showering, bathing? I guess bathing and showering are the same thing. Feeding, bathing, moving, things like that. There's also IADL, which is instrumental activities of daily living, which are measuring things like can you drive, can you balance your checkbook, how many of those types of things are you still able to do? So that's your functional age. Then there's your psychological age, which is just how old you feel you are. And I would imagine if we were to do research with people who are older, or quite honestly, people at any stage of adulthood, it'd be really interesting to find out what their answers would be about how old do they feel that they are. I think, I don't think I feel older than I am. I think I actually feel younger, although my body, now that I'm in my 40s, getting started in my 40s, is probably going to start reminding me more and more that I'm not the age that I think I am. But it's kind of an interesting thing to think about because some people do perceive themselves as kind of older, and maybe it is because their body might be failing them or things of that sort. So moving on, social age. And so I think this one's interesting. It's whether a person performs a social role within the age range of social norms. And this always makes me think of when it is in life we might have children, right? So I had my son when I was 20, which is not too terribly young, but it kind of is nowadays, right? And so when I'm a mom at age 20, 21, 22, I'm pretty much performing a role that's kind of outside the social norms. My peers were not necessarily moms by any means. And if I did have friends that were moms, chances are they were, possibly 8, 10, or more years older than I was. And so thinking through, especially if we bring back in the sociological imagination, if it were 1960, being 20 years old and having a child probably really wouldn't have been outside the social norms as much as it might be today. And so performing that role. My grandmother, in 1955, I believe, had a little sister, Helen, who lived down the street from her in Glenview, Illinois. And Helen was a younger sister. My grandma came from a family of 8. But Aunt Helen was in her early 40s when she found out she was pregnant. And so my grandma heard this, my grandma being the older sister, and said, apparently, this is like the famous line in our family, "Oh, Helen, you fool at our age." And then my grandma, right about the same time, at her being age 45, found out that she too was actually pregnant and had my uncle at age 45. And so she very much in 1955 was performing a social role outside of social norms. She had a 20-year-old son at that point who would have been like the age to have children. And so just thinking about the age that you are when you have children is one example of many about social age. Also want to discuss different ways of aging. And so there's first is normal, that we kind of start to lose abilities and functioning in what we define as kind of normal stages of loss. So we will get older and older, and that's going to affect our bodies and our minds and things of that sort in similar ways. But then there is pathological, and that is actually when aging processes are expedited by outside factors, extrinsic factors, which are not necessarily a part of the body's natural aging process. So things that could be outside of ourselves that make us age faster could be diet, exercise, sleep, stress, environmental factors, things like did you wear sunscreen, all of these different aspects outside of ourselves that might impact how quickly we age. Then there's optimal, which is basically just the very best way anybody ever could do. The people that you see that are like, how could you possibly be that old? You don't seem, look, or anything like it. And then finally, there's successful. And so that's now actively using the extrinsic factors to fight, I guess, to counteract the natural, usual aging process. So now you're using diet, a good diet, and a good amount of exercise, and you're getting sleep, and you're reducing stress, and you're wearing your sunscreen, and you're, on the lookout for kind of environmental pollution and what possibly you utilize in your home and things of that sort to try to counteract what happens naturally and kind of stretch out not necessarily youth, but health and well-being, right, into our older years. So the last thing I want to do is share with you a couple of sociological theories of aging. And so the first one is disengagement theory. And so this is when a person possibly retires from their career and they are starting to get older and they kind of pull away from society. They become more isolated, but also society does not come looking for them. We do not, to be blunt, we do not value people of advancing age. We treat them as if they are not as capable, that they are not as vibrant, and that is not very fair at all. There's, I think, a lot of discrimination involved in prejudice and discrimination in individuals who, like we all will be at some point, who are getting older and older. And so that idea of disengagement theory is really, really sad that people kind of disengage from society. Speaking of my family, my grandmother had a little brother, Uncle Ted, and his wife, Aunt Lorraine. They both also lived in Chicago. And so as we visited them in their later years, I remember Aunt Lorraine having a conversation with me about retirement. And she said how people just look forward to this for so much of their career, and then you retire and you kind of pull away from work and it gets very, very lonely. And so I'd never thought of retirement in that way, the isolation of it. And so that's very much a part of disengagement theory, that you're pulled away from society and the institutions in society do not try to engage you. Then the opposite of that is continuity theory, and that's to age successfully, you maintain a vibrant life. You maintain your self identity and you find new things to do, new ways to participate, possibly volunteering, possibly a second career or kind of a part time job or whatever it is that, lights your heart on fire and gives you energy and purpose. I think if, as a society, we really reached out to individuals in our aging population and engaged them and looked to them to be a vibrant part of society, all of our institutions would look very, very different. Can you imagine if schools, possibly like local community centers, partnered with individuals who are getting older and had them kind of mentor and support younger individuals that may be struggling or may just need more resources or more people to be a support system for them? Can you imagine if we really looked to people who are older to learn and live through their experiences and value what they have to offer as opposed to discount what we believe that they have to offer. And so I really, really believe in the ideas of continuity theory. And I would really, really encourage you to think about your entire life plan. In class, I actually have my students, because we do so much active work, they do probably the weirdest activity that they have all semester, where I make them write their own obituaries, and they all freak out. But then we get a chance to talk about kind of what their philosophy is on aging, which you will do in this class via a discussion board, and how old you might want to be. And then you talk about what you want as far as family and your career and volunteering in your community and hobbies and special interests and things of that sort. And so, really, what they find out quickly is something that seems so weird and morbid as to write your own obituary. You partner with somebody in the class, and so you're doing this together and discussing these aspects. It's not about dying, it's about how you want to live your life. And so, as we kind of start to wrap up Introduction to Sociology, I hope that some of the things that we have learned in this class, including aging, gets you thinking about how you want to live your life in relation to the society that we have and how you want to contribute. And I hope that that plan for you looks well beyond the career aspirations that you have right now. And so, what do you want your second act to be, or maybe even your third act? Because as you can see, people are living longer and longer, and you will be healthy and strong and vibrant. And I'm eager to be a part of a society that you'll be contributing to. Except I'm probably older than you, and so I will have taken my last breath. So by all means, go out and make society great for me.